Welcome to the Holding Time podcast, where we share inspiring stories from remarkable mothers who participated in the Holding Time project in Bradford. Each episode, we explore their unique breastfeeding stories, the highs, the lows, the challenges and the triumphs. Whether you're expecting, a new parent, or simply curious, we invite you to hear from these resilient warrior women as they share their experiences. Find out more at holdingtime.org.
Hi, my name's Aisha. I'm a mother of one 3.5-year-old toddler who's an adopted little boy who came to live with us about 1.5 years ago.
Can I start by asking you just a little bit of the context of how you came to adopt? Because you're the first parent I've ever spoken to who adopted their child. So this is totally new territory for me. So please bear with me. I've never interviewed a mother talked about breastfeeding in this context.
All right, so the adoption journey, it was a long journey. About 5 years ago, we initially decided that we wanted to adopt. Fertility had been an issue. We'd tried to have our own biological child. It hadn't happened. We'd considered the IVF route, and then I wasn't able to because of various factors. And I'm happy to share this because it's a trauma that other wannabe mothers will have had, in that I was 42 at the point when we decided we were going to do it, and on the NHS you could only get IVF treatment up to your 43rd birthday. But because I was overweight, they wouldn't accept me at that stage until I'd lost some weight, and by that time I was 43 and therefore no longer eligible. And so that was heartbreaking in itself. We had already been talking about adopting anyway for years before, so we just decided we don't want to put ourselves through this journey with all the factors against us. Let's just go the adoption route, because we'd always said we would. Even if we had our own biological children, we'd always said we would like to also adopt. So that was about 2018, and then it was just a long, protracted journey for multiple reasons, including the fact that our initial adoption training happened, and then the pandemic hit, and then everything got stalled because of that. So, long story short, eventually last year, 2023, about January, we were matched with our little boy, and then March we got started getting to know you, and then he moved in with us in April 2023, and it's been a roller coaster ride ever since. And at the time he was 2 years old.
I have some understanding of that journey because I have endometriosis, and so I was diagnosed as infertile when I was 38, and they said, oh well, there's an operation that you could maybe have, and so I did the operation. It was horrendous, and it took a lot out of me. And then I had IVF. So I had a 9-year fertility journey up to that point of that diagnosis, and then all the usual messing around fertility tests, and then IVF and miscarriage. And then I was going for my second round of IVF just before I was about to turn 40, which was like the threshold. And I remember that thing of them weighing you, and I was just about under the BMI. It's kind of a nonsense, really, isn't it? Because BMI is kind of meaningless anyway, from what I can understand. You could be a weightlifter and you'd be over the BMI and be one of the fittest people.
And I've seen people who naturally conceive who are bigger than me, and so
massively,
and
massively.
older. And people, I'm 48 now, but at the time I was 42 when I started. And I distinctly remember Lisa being in the hospital, and they're telling us that fertility-wise we were fine. It could happen for us. There were some minor things, but then the weight thing. And then when I realised the timing of it, I just broke down in the hospital, and I thought, do I really want to put myself through this, all of the stuff that's expected? And then we're not even anywhere near the actual thing yet of the IVF journey. And then the uncertainties around that as well, having read everything that I'd read about it and the experiences of many of my friends.
I always sort of say that IVF is something, they'll look at the instruments of IVF in a museum in like 100 years' time, and they'll say this is what they used to torture women who couldn't have children. It's really brutal.
Brutal, and yet a gift as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah.
Tragic irony of it, isn't it? But it's your joy and your despair in a test tube, basically.
You mentioned that he was 2 when he arrived, so I'm quite interested to know about the context where you were considering breastfeeding. So
yes.
Was he ever breastfed?
He was 2 days old when he was taken into care. So he never really had a relationship with his biological mother, and then went straight into foster care. was never breastfed, was with the same foster parents for that time. So as far as I know, he's never been breastfed. But I was coming at it, not that I'm a deeply religious person, but I was coming at the breastfeeding from an Islamic point of view. In Islam, even if you adopted a child, or any child actually, if any child is weaned by you, or you at any point feed him your breast milk, like a wet nurse or whatever, then he is, for all intents, your biological son. So he has the same rights and you have the same relationship with him as a biological mother. So I've been reading a lot around this and talking to friends about it. And it was just a way for me, obviously, as a non-religious Muslim, to feel closer to my child. So I thought this is amazing. It was an amazing way to bond with him, even at age 2. And age 2 is kind of the limit, really. Islamically, 2, 3 is the limit. You don't really breastfeed beyond that, or certainly with an adopted child, they do recommend. And so I wanted to really, as soon as he moved in, to be able to ideally do that.
You said that child has the same rights as a biological child. I mean, it's sort of slightly off topic, but I'm kind of fascinated to know.
Like, he is effectively then your biological son. Yeah, he is considered your biological son because you've breastfed him.
Wow.
Or daughter, or daughter, yeah, similar.
Yeah.
I don't know the religious background about it, but
no, I mean it's interesting. I only know some scraps that I learned from a conference regarding Jewish wet nurses and contracts between Jewish people and wet nurses, which was very important that the wet nurse was Jewish, because there was this whole thing about the sort of, well, basically in Chinese medicine, breast milk is called white blood.
Yeah.
And so it is kind of like you're giving the child your DNA almost.
Well, I'm just reading something about it here, so I might as well just take us both through it. We could learn as we go, really. So in Islam, wet nursing or breastfeeding someone other than the infant's biological mother is permissible. It was a common practice in pre-Islamic Arabia and during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, who was breastfed by his mother and 2 wet nurses. In Islamic law, the right to be breastfed is considered one of a child's most important rights. If a mother is unable to breastfeed, she and the father can agree to have a wet nurse feed the child, or the father can pay a wet nurse to do so. Wet nursing has been used in many societies for a variety of reasons, including creating clients, consolidating clan unity, making peace between tribes, and preventing marriage. Preventing marriage as in, if you've wet nursed a child, you could never marry them. Not that it would be very likely to happen, but it has been known to happen. In Muslim societies, women are often required to breastfeed their husband's children for 2 years. So that's where the 2 years come from. Islam has a highly codified system of milk kinship known as rada. According to Islamic law, parents must know the identity of the wet nurse to respect the kinship that is created between the wet nurse and the infant. The law on wet nursing is also related to mahram. This is the key bit, which is a person who is forbidden to marry a woman due to a kinship, marriage, or sisterhood relationship. For example, religious standards say that marriages made with the knowledge of milk kinship are invalid because sexual relations would be considered a perverse family relationship and the most severe type of adultery. Now, this, in terms of the doctrine and the scriptures, is important. So, because if 2 children are breastfed by the same mother, even if they're not biologically related, they would never be able to, they couldn't marry.
Is that RADA? Is that RADA?
RADA, that's how it's...
I've never heard of that. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, I'd never heard the word, but that's the kind of wider religious context. But when you talk about the adoption side of things, it's about bringing the child closer to the mother and, him being essentially your biological child.
Wow. So I understand now more fully the context of wanting to. I also understand from the point of view of like having contemplated adoption myself, fostering, I looked into that quite extensively, and I still have all the paperwork. It's interesting to me that you said that you thought even if you had your own biological child, you would then adopt. And I had also thought that, but actually what I found is it's actually quite a difficult thing to do once you've got a child to adopt another one.
Our plan had always been to hopefully have 2 of our own and maybe adopt 1 or 2.
That's kind of what I also thought. But I ended up I got pregnant completely unexpectedly by accident, actually quite miraculously. And that was when I was due to have that second round of IVF. And having had a child and experienced motherhood in all its complexity, I then feel that I could adopt another child. It's just so I've ended up with one child. I mean, it's just interesting how things don't necessarily turn out the way you can't when you're conceiving of a child mentally or conceiving of a family mentally is one thing. It's very abstract, isn't it? Then there's the reality.
Yes.
I mean, you've gone into it like full throttle, haven't you? You've kind of gone from a standing start into like onto a motorway, basically.
Exactly, with a toddler. I'll just do a little bit more around this. And this is the key bit actually for me when it comes to adoptive mothers and breastfeeding. So adoptive mothers may try to breastfeed their children to give them the same rights as a birth child, such as becoming a mahram or unmarriageable kin, which is what we mentioned, to their adoptive family. According to Islamic law, breastfeeding an infant 3 to 5 or more times when they are under 2 years old can achieve this. Scholars have set certain criteria for breastfeeding to be considered sufficient, including that the milk reaches the child's stomach and is enough for at least 5 nursing sessions.
Wow.
So there you go. That was the context in which, Islamically, I was trying to do this. But from a personal perspective, it was very much about closeness to my child.
Yeah, and that's what I can relate to. I mean, that's certainly something that you want to do, is knit the fabric of your physicality, that bonding, the intimacy,
skin to skin contact and all that stuff. So trying to, I say replicate, but that's not really the right word.
Well, you're doing it. It's not replicating it, it's doing it, isn't it?
Feeling like a mother in every sense. Yeah.
And it's about quickly establishing that bond, I suppose. It's a very so tell me about how that, how you initiated that process, or how did that begin?
So I did a little bit of reading around this. There's quite a lot around about it, because actually it's not uncommon for trying to induce lactation, because some mothers do struggle. And so there's methods like expressing, there's certain teas and things you can drink, like there's loads of herbal remedies. So that's what I did. I bought a load of herbal teas and was drinking them regularly, and bought myself a breast pump and was just pumping every day.
Okay. So
yeah.
Basically, I mean, kind of like what you'd call relactating if you'd given birth, like if your milk supply shuts down and you need to get it going again, you just relactate. But you can do that from a standing start.
And exactly, apparently it's like fennel tea. Fennel tea is considered a real one of those. There's lots of other stuff. My sister had lent me some of hers as well. Soon after my son moved in with us, my sister gave birth to her second son and was breastfeeding him. And so she had got hold of some teas as well to help her produce more milk. So between us, we had got this whole range, whole pharmacy. And then, every day for a certain amount of time, I was sitting down with a breast pump, just literally just trying to produce milk. For weeks I did it, but it didn't happen. So then we started having a discussion, just informally, me and some of the ladies in the family. And it might have been someone else in the family who suggested it, although it had been in the back of my mind that my sister and me, like in terms of our DNA, biologically, we're exactly the same. And actually, in terms of the closeness of that biological relationship, we could replicate it, and it is the right word this time, if he were to have her breast milk. And so that's what we did. So she essentially breastfed my child. So excess milk that she produced, she froze. And then when we were visiting, we had a few days where he was having her breast milk at the time when he was regularly drinking milk. And if the child has equivalent of 5 feedings, then you fulfill that kind of Islamic law element. And I think he had more than that because he loved it, actually. And it's really amazing, Lisa, that he really is very close to my sister.
Is he?
He would be because she's my sister. But and I think she feels that bond as well. But I think he feels it to some extent as well.
So the milk was fed to him like in a cup.
Yeah, just in a normal cup. Yeah, like a little sippy cup. And he had it. And it just meant that Islamically, he is in every sense, he is now considered biologically my child. And therefore, all those relationships on every level with every member of my family and extended family, it is considered a biological relationship. Yeah.
Does that change anything? I suppose it's impossible to know, having, if you hadn't done that, would anything have been different? But do you feel that that has had an impact on more than just a sort of symbolic level? Do you feel like it's had an impact on you and your family and him?
Obviously, he was just, everyone loves him to bits and he's part of our family. But yeah, I suppose it just solidifies it, doesn't it? I love my sister for doing it, for sharing that. I love the love that she gives him. There is a tinge of sadness to it all, but it is what it is, you know.
Can I ask you about when you were trying to express, did you try him on your breast?
No, because he's 2.5 by then, so we were kind of on the cusp, really. Islamically, it's 2 is the cut-off date, really. So we were on the cusp. But I suppose it's open to a little bit of interpretation. But no, I didn't. I never did.
Yeah, because
I didn't think about it. Maybe I could.
I mean, it's just a question, isn't it? It's like, I wonder if it could have. This is all very experimental, isn't it, in a way? And women do try things out.
Amazing thing. The body is capable of so much.
Yeah.
The body is a magical thing, and I wouldn't have been surprised, actually.
And my sister said to me, actually, maybe when I was struggling with breastfeeding, she said that she could actually produce milk. She felt like years later, if she heard a child cry on the bus, that she could nearly produce milk for it.
Wow.
You know, having breastfed 2 children, it's like we are just all instinctively created to care for children, not necessarily our own. Like, it's indiscriminate.
There's something in that, definitely. Whenever you pick up a child and they're crying, sometimes I've sensed it with my nephews that they will be grabbing for my breast because their instinct is also to grab for the nearest breast, isn't it?
Yeah.
If they've got that warmth and that relationship with you, for example, with a nephew, then it's a very, very natural thing. So
it's kind of one of the physiological embodiments of what is so, I suppose, enlightening, but also incredibly intensely painful about parenthood, is that once you become a parent, your responsibility becomes to all children. Like, you can try to lock it down to just your child. And obviously you have to do that to some extent to ensure that they're okay. And some people are better at doing that than others. But ultimately, you become invested in this other generation. You have an emotional tie to all of them that you didn't have before you had children. I don't think it's the same. I loved children before I had a child, and actually I did informally foster children. And I also helped to raise my sister's children, like really helped, was there 2 nights a week. So really, really was involved, which is why I'm so interested in this idea of another mothering, because that's the mothering I was doing for a long, long time before I became biologically a parent or legally or a guardian. I had my own child.
People sometimes say, don't they, you're so maternal. It's just natural to somebody. That can be hurtful as well, unintentionally, unwittingly hurtful as well. But yeah, it's just there, isn't it? The other thing was that because all the reading I'd done had been, you need to try like weeks, months in advance to get your body ready. So this was before he moved in that I was trying to do this, to get my body ready. And it didn't happen. And I think somewhere along the line, I just gave up a little bit because I thought it just isn't happen. And then when he actually arrived, it was just the roller coaster had started. So we're just dealing with everything else. So it kind of fell by the wayside.
I wonder how much more support there could be in terms of raising the oxytocin level of women who are attempting this. So, because one thing I do know from really struggling, I lost my lactation. I got double mastitis. I had to relactate. I went through, like a lot of women, a lot of struggle with breastfeeding.
And mastitis is when it's what happens? The nipples
you have an
harden.
infection in your breasts.
Right,
the ducts become infected. You get very high temperature, sore throat, but it's agonizing. It's like someone's taken a sword and cut them off. It is so painful. And relactating is really difficult. And I could only produce like half a teaspoon. That combined with your baby losing weight, it's like quite a terrifying roller coaster. But one thing I do know is that being incredibly relaxed and looking at women feeding babies or looking at babies actually raises your oxytocin levels.
Oh, okay.
And so I saw in the paper about these mothers who were sitting topless breastfeeding their babies in front of an orangutan at Dublin Zoo to try and help that mother learn how to breastfeed.
Well,
It's so interesting that 40 women showed up to show that one orangutan how to breastfeed, but your average mother gets none of that help,
yeah.
These are humans.
Well, it's that thing, isn't it, about it takes a village to raise a child? It kind of, it's a version of that, isn't it?
And if you are trying from a standing start without all the hormones from birth to try to lactate, you actually need extra help, don't you?
Do you know what? I wish I had thought it earlier, Lisa. Honestly, I do. And I don't know of any, because I did Google, basically, is how I found out. And I was trying to do it myself. That's partly because of my own stubborn streak as well, thinking I can do things. But also, it wasn't even in my head that there was a support system for something like this. I did think about going to the GP, but actually there would seem to be so much information about herbal remedies and things. I thought, let's just give this a go.
You were sort of left to your own devices then.
I was left to my own devices. And I wish going back, probably I should have sought help. I probably should have gone to a doctor, and maybe he or she could have directed me somewhere.
I think it would have been a lactation consultant, but even then, you're going down this medicalized route. And I personally feel that a lot of, what makes breastfeeding is the socio-cultural practice. It's artistry, it's a cultural inheritance, it's something that people do in families, it's intimate, it's flesh to flesh. And in fact, a lot of the help that you desperately need is that kind of help.
Also, it's that thing, Lisa, about it being the most natural thing in the world. When you can't do it, you do feel so unnatural.
Those are things that are natural. It's natural to sleep. But how many nights have you had where you can't sleep?
Yeah.
It's something the body does. But saying it's natural is a bit of a misnomer, because actually it requires, just like sleep, certain hormonal levels to be in a certain place in order for it to happen. And for it to kick in without a child present, just with the stimulation. I mean, I relactated using machines. So I expressed for 4 months. So I know what that process is. And my God, it was hard.
Did it eventually get back to producing enough?
Yeah, but I had to express every 2 hours.
Wow.
I had the Rolls Royce of machines, so like a multi-thousand-pound machine, which makes a very, very big difference. And even then, it took, I'd say, 3 weeks of every 2 hours. And I had the fenugreek and all the, stuff that you were doing, which does, it's effective, the fenugreek. I found it did up my supply, but I can't imagine how that would be possible without a baby actually sucking on your breast. Like, I think that's the stimulation that you need.
I mean, I was doing all the other stuff like massaging and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Relax, trying to relax myself, doing all the things that Google basically said.
I'd just like to ask you to add anything in terms of any advice you would have for a mother, undertaking what you've undertaken.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose take advice early on, really. Speak to other mothers, especially adoptive mothers who might have tried this. Seek out those networks before your child actually comes into the home. Don't be afraid of taking medical advice, because, as you mentioned, it's education to me. What did you call lactation nurses and lactation practitioners?
Lactation consultants.
Yeah. Which every surgery, I would imagine, has. Plan a little bit around this. But also, don't feel guilty, I suppose. I mean, it's easy for me to say now, but whatever you can do to mitigate that. It's a tough journey. It is. If I go back and think, what would I have done differently? Definitely seek advice earlier.
And more than what you would have done, is there more that you feel you could have done with?
Oh, gosh, yeah. I think had I known before that, or if there was a support network available locally. I mean, every town, every city should have a breastfeeding mother support network, and not just one for those who are actually breastfeeding, but those who are struggling too. I think that is important. It's like with everything, isn't it? It's resourcing, ultimately.
Mothers in Bradford that I've spoken to have talked about the need for a hub, a place that every day is open to women who are trying to breastfeed or want to breastfeed, or even those who have breastfed who might be able to mend that.
And it's the kind of thing you would have thought we would already have, and I'm surprised we don't, to be honest with you. Until it's your time for needing it, you're not necessarily going to look for one, are you? So, I think some public sector resource in something like that would be massively helpful. And something for older mums, actually, Lisa, if I'm honest with you, because obviously I came to motherhood age 46. There's a lot around that as well, away from the breastfeeding, that I feel like at the school gates, for example, I don't connect. I don't feel I have anything in common with those mums, even though I do, because I'm coming from a whole different level of experience and perspective. And the kind of motherhood dream has played out very differently for me than it might have done for other mums. And so I do feel myself deeply emotionally impacted by that as well. And I hadn't realised how much until, what was it? Just a couple of weeks ago when I just took my son to the park. And I just realised, oh my goodness, some of these ladies are half my age and they're able to run around after their child in the way that I can't.
Take care.
Thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day.
Thanks so much to you.
Take care.
Okay, cheerio. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Holding Time podcast. We're grateful to everyone involved in this project, including our partners and funders, Bradford District Care Trust and Arts Council England and Better Place Bradford, and all the incredible mothers and families who made it all possible. For more information, visit holdingtime.org. The link is in the episode description. Please like, follow or subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And consider sharing this podcast to help raise awareness and support for breastfeeding.